What's up, everyone, and welcome into episode number 471, where the Detroit Tigers are still struggling playing baseball. Looks like they're on the way to losing the series against the Minnesota Twins, unless the Tigers end up making a pretty big comeback in the 8th and ninth inning. I will also talk about the Detroit Lions. They have a game against the Atlanta Falcons on Friday. I'll talk about that game. I'll also talk about a couple other news relating injuries. You also have some Zadarius Smith conversations to talk about as well. But before I get into both of those pretty big news weeks, I also want to talk a little bit about two kind of smaller news topics. Not really a ton to talk about, at least go into detail as of right now. But the first one is Michigan basketball announced that they are doing a home-and-home series against Villanova. Villanova will be going to Michigan this year. Michigan will be going to Villanova next year. This is going to be an interesting matchup. Obviously, it's not as interesting as maybe it was when Jay Wright was the head coach, but it's going to be a really fun matchup, kind of two programs that recently has been pretty decent. I know Michigan obviously was pretty good last year, weren't really great the years prior to that, but you got two pretty big brands in basketball playing each other, so you obviously really like to see that. I'll be interested to see how Villanova is this year. Michigan obviously has a lot higher expectations, bringing in the transfer class that they did, and also you have Dusty May under year number 2. So that's going to be a game that is really going to be fun if you're a Michigan fan, especially at Chrysler Center, and then Michigan's going to return the favor next year. They don't know exactly when that date will be, but they will be returning to Villanova sometime next year. So really interesting matchup. Definitely a matchup that you can see why Michigan and Villanova both did it. There's going to be a lot of people keeping an eye on that game. And yeah, it's going to be really fun to see how Michigan and Villanova match up this year and next year as well. The other really kind of news I really want to talk about, not huge breaking news, but the NCAA did announce that they gave the notice of allegations to CMU. Basically, CMU has, I think, like 90 days to respond. I think September sometime they have to respond by. Obviously, these notice of allegations is regarding to the Connor Stallions situation, that he was basically snuck on the sideline against MSU, that he was trying to help CMU in that game. It also was the first time play caller, which it really seemed like he was pretty good friends with Connor Stallions. There's a lot of Michigan connections on that staff, like former Michigan coaching staff on that CMU staff. You can see why they did that, but at the same time, if you're Michigan State, I truly think that these notice of allegations, one, really did confirm that that was truly Connor Stallions. And number two, I think that matchup, at least in 2027, needs to be off the table, in my opinion. I think you can't give Central Michigan any more money, at least football-wise, after they did that to your team. Again, Jay Batt really hasn't been asked or talked about that too much, so obviously you don't know exactly what he's going to do. But if you're MSU, I think at least 2027 needs to be off the table. 2030, maybe. I think it just might be a little while before Michigan State and Central Michigan kind of reconnect in athletics. And I think that's going to hurt CMU, obviously. Now, that's not guaranteed, but that's just kind of the approach I would have, is CMU did this to Michigan State. Obviously, the head coach is not there. Jim McElwain basically retired or stepped away on his own accord. So obviously there's a different coaching staff there, but it still happened under Central Michigan, still happened under the athletic administration, still happened under the athletic director. She's still there. I can definitely see that Michigan State should and probably will at least cancel one of those games, and that's just my opinion. Not necessarily a guarantee, but that's what I would do if I was Michigan State. But yeah, this is just kind of a long process of the NCAA taking a long time. Obviously, these notice of allegations means that kind of this whole Connor Stallions situation is going to hopefully be done in a little bit. And I think for everyone, they would be kind of happy that's be done, because obviously you have people on Twitter that seem to really care about it. Michigan's like, it's not really a big deal. Michigan State, Ohio State fans are like, yes, it is a big deal. I just feel like this saga just kind of needs to end. And once we got the notice of allegations, once we kind of hear what Michigan and Central Michigan is going to do, then at that time it can just be the punishment the way it is. And obviously once that happens, I'll talk more about it. But yeah, just the NCAA finally sent those notice of allegations, finally getting closer to kind of figure out what's going on, kind of figuring out what this punishment is going to be. And we're getting one step closer to finally wrapping this up after 1+ year of waiting to see what's going to happen, which I'm obviously really happy about. Now let's get into kind of the bigger parts of the week. You got the Detroit Tigers. I thought they played pretty well against the Phillies in their series. They did end up losing in the series, but I thought the Tigers played pretty well overall. The Phillies team is just really, really talented. You have a guy in like Kyle Schwarber that honestly probably should be getting some conversation in the MVP part of MLB. I think he's been fantastic this year. He's hit huge home runs. They also have Bryce Harper. This Phillies team is just a really, really good team. And for the Tigers to go into the Phillies series kind of struggling a little bit, even though that they did sweep the Diamondbacks, which weren't a really good team, I think kind of getting one win out of there, kind of experiencing what hopefully playoff baseball is going to be like, definitely did give them a little bit of motivation and gave them a little bit of a head start going into the Minnesota Twins series, which they're wrapping that up today. You obviously got game 1 against the Minnesota Twins, which is really a team that traded majority of their team. Like, a lot of these stars aren't going to be guys that have been starting for them. You end up winning game 1, which was basically a home run contest. So obviously don't love that from a pitching standpoint. But one really kind of positive point of what Scott Harris has done so far is Kyle Finnegan. Kyle Finnegan is 2 for 2 when he comes to save situations. Got to save in that game, got to save in the Philly series. He's looked really good when he's out there. Outside of that, you look at kind of these guys. I thought that Chris Paddock was good in his first start, then went against the Twins, gave up 4 earned runs, 3 of those in the first inning, went 4 innings. Chris Paddock did not look good at all. You have Rafael Montero come in the game later that inning as well. 2 earned runs, 1 inning. Like, these guys, while they're really poor performances, it's kind of a little bit too early to kind of tell, like, is this a good move? Is this not a good move? The Montero performance, in my opinion, isn't a great sign. You kind of saw what Tigers fans were really worried about when they traded him. In this 1 inning, he wasn't able to throw strikes. He wasn't able to get outs. That's his biggest issue this year, and we saw it through that 1 inning. Now, there was points in that 1 inning where you kind of saw a little bit of potential of what he could have been, at least in the past. But again, the Rafael Montero that we saw in the 1 inning is the Rafael Montero that fans have been seeing this year. So obviously do not necessarily love that if you're a Tigers fan. And then, like I said, Chris Paddock had a bad outing this past one against the Twins. Again, like I was saying, the Twins traded a lot of their starters. This is not a very good Twins team. Now, it looks like the Tigers are on their way to probably losing game 3, which Flaherty was awful today. We looked at Flaherty last start, and it's like one of his best starts this year, which isn't really saying too much because he's really struggled this year. But then Flaherty comes out in this game and just can't get out. Lots of home runs. Now, the Tigers did do a good job of responding, but then you get the bullpen and you have Canely struggling. You have Holton giving up home runs. When you give up 9 earned runs to the Minnesota Twins, especially this offense, there's a real issue. And there's a real possibility that during this podcast, the Tigers could be coming back because the Twins bullpen is not good. It's probably maybe even a little bit worse than what the Tigers have. But when you give up so many earned runs and when you're really struggling at the plate, even against pitchers that just aren't great, you're not going to be able to score 10 runs and expect to win games. Like, they're not playing well right now, and you're going to lose to not only a divisional opponent, but as of right now, if you lose this game and the Guardians win, guess what? 6 games, and it's August 6th. Like, few weeks ago, it was 10, 11, 12 games. Things can start to get really, really tight and really uncomfortable, and it's starting to get there, and I think this series really is kind of the point where fans might be starting to kind of realize, like, hey, like this team, there's a real possibility that there's some value in taking the Guardians betting wise. I think it's plus 3,300, which obviously is still a long bet to win. But with the way that the Guardians have been playing, even though they're quote unquote selling, it really seems like the Tigers are kind of selling too, even though they didn't sell at the trade deadline. They went to go get people. Now, again, the people that they did get, they've had good performances, but at the same time, some of these guys that have had been one good performance, one bad performance, or just one bad performance overall. And obviously, like I said a little bit earlier, you can't say they're necessarily a bust at this point, but there's real concern about some of these moves. And I think having kind of the performance that Paddock had and having the performance that Montero had, I definitely think, kind of back on the side of like, Scott Harris, did you really, really need to trade for these guys? Again, these guys can turn around. One bad performance from Paddock, one good performance from Paddock. Montero is definitely concerning out of the two of them. Kyle Finnegan has been the brightest spot. When he's had a possibility of actually saving a game, he's done so. He just hasn't had many opportunities to do so. So definitely going to be something to kind of keep an eye on there. But Tigers are definitely continuing to struggle, and the bullpen is just not performing well. Starting pitching is not performing well. And if you just don't have the offense that you have earlier in the beginning of the year, the Tigers just aren't going to win very many games, and it doesn't help when Riley Green is striking out quite a bit. It doesn't help when Javi Baez is swinging at strikes 6 feet off the plate. It's just this team just feels like they're not even close to what they were, and this team is just starting to continue to roll down a hill, and you need either starting pitching to pick you up, you need Therese Skubal to continue to pitch well, you need Jack Flaherty or Casey Mize to step up, or maybe you need a Paddock or Charlie Morton, which actually in his outing, Charlie Morton actually looked really good, even though they lost their game to kind of stand up and make a difference. But this Tigers team is just in a really, really bad spot right now, and they need to figure out a way to win, or we're going to be talking about going into September maybe up less than 5 games, and at that point, just anyone's division, which is sad for kind of where the Tigers started out and how they've gotten here. Don't want to kind of continue to talk about that bad news, though, because no one likes bad news. So I really want to get into the Detroit Lions. There's been a little bit more positive news on that aspect of sports. Now, there's a little bit of bad news. It does seem like Ennis Rakestraw Jr. will be out for a while with a shoulder injury. He's been kind of injured throughout his career. I know a lot of people were pretty excited about that pick. I definitely was too. You kind of saw what Brad Holmes was trying to do in that draft, go back-to-back corners, trying to find the corners of the future. Ennis Rakestraw just hasn't been healthy. Obviously, with him being out for a while, that's definitely going to really hurt the depth. It really seems like Ian Kenley might be out for a little while too. You have Dan Jackson going on the IR. Like, you look at kind of the depth this Lions team has, and it's definitely deeper than it was last year. And I think the stars are definitely a lot better, especially in the secondary. I think Terrion Arnold seems like he's been great in training camp, so obviously that's a really good sign. You have DJ Reed as well, which I think is going to be probably your cornerback 1. Terrion will probably be your cornerback 2. You can probably switch those back and forth, honestly. I think they've both been really good. And then, yeah, you have a couple other guys that are really starting to step up. Williams was really, really good yesterday. Aiden Hutchinson has been absolutely dominating the offensive line. Now, again, you still have Taylor Decker still trying to come back. It sounds like he's doing a little bit of individual work. So you have him going up against, like, Giovanni Manu and Dan Skipper, which is obviously unfair for those guys because they're not going to be able to stop Aiden Hutchinson even at like 80%. Like even at 50%, they probably would still struggle against Aiden Hutchinson. But like he's been looking really, really good. And then you also have Isaac Tesla, who's actually taking some first team reps with this Lions team, which one I think is really fascinating. But two, it really kind of talks a little bit about how Tim Patrick has struggled this training camp. He even talked about how he hasn't been his best self. And while that isn't necessarily a concern, he did go out and did have kind of an injury. So I don't think long-term Tim Patrick is someone to be super nervous about. But when you have a guy like Isaac Tesla and you see kind of the potential that he has, especially in game 1 against the Chargers, I think you're going to see him more in game 2 against the Atlanta Falcons, and you'll kind of see what kind of connection he has with like a Hendon Hooker, who will be starting Friday against the Falcons. If Isaac Tesla has the kind of performance he had in game 1 and game 2, like that efficient, I think you're going to have Isaac Tesla maybe playing a little bit more in training in kind of like the preseason games. I wouldn't really have him playing much more. I think you already kind of see what he can be and kind of the potential that he can have. And if he's the guy that's taking first-team reps, if he's going to be a wide receiver number 3, wide receiver number 4, I don't think you want to take too much of a chance on him getting injured just because of how good he has been. Obviously, being a rookie, he does need time. But from what we've seen from Isaac Tesla at this moment, I've been very, very impressed, and I think he's going to be a guy that, like I said in the last episode, that fans are really going to really draw to, and you can really kind of see what Brad Holmes have seen in him: effort, blocking, making catches. Like Isaac Tesla in game 1 was kind of the player that I think Brad Holmes kind of envisioned him to be, but he still has to get so much better. Like, he still has a ton of room to grow. He made plays. He was able to make catches. He was able to block. He was being able to participate on special teams. Isaac Tesla is going to be a guy that, if he does succeed with the Lions, he's going to be a guy that's going to be a fan favorite, not only because he's from the state of Michigan, but because he understands what it's like to kind of be a fan of the Lions growing up. Because you see Isaac Tesla, even after practices, I think there was a video yesterday, basically he talked about how he was the last guy on the field signing autographs. Like, he's like, imagine what it was like when I was there. Like, he kind of had to be forced off the field. Like, this is a guy that's going to be a fan favorite. This is going to be a guy that's really kind of bought in and really wants to succeed. And I'm a really, really big fan of Isaac Tesla and love seeing him get first-team reps. You're giving him a chance. You have a guy, like I said, Tim Patrick, that has shown success in this league. He was pretty big last year for the Lions, and if he can be kind of your 4th wide receiver, with Isaac Tesla being your 3rd, kind of switching back and forth, I think that could be a really, really fun 1 through 4 wide receiver group. And you still have Dominic Lovett. You still have a couple other wide receivers that can contribute to this team. But this wide receiving room is going to be really fun, and I think Isaac Tesla is going to be one person that's really going to be important for this team and is really going to factor into this team and the offense, because the offense actually has been really kind of struggling recently during the training camp. The defense has looked really, really good. Now, I do think it has, again, to do with kind of the pressure the defensive line has been able to get on the offense. The offensive line is still not completely healthy. There's been flashes where the offense have looked really good. Now, they're always that basically saying, or most people believe, that the offense usually does take a little bit longer to kind of get going than the defense does, especially in training camp. I do think this defense overall is a better team than they were last year. I also think they're still kind of getting used to this offense a little bit under John Moran. Like, obviously, they said they're going to keep a lot of it the same, but some of it's going to be different. You're going to have to figure out what you're going to do at the center position. It kind of seems like Glasgow is going to be probably the center. Once Taylor Decker comes back, I think that will definitely help as well. But this offense just kind of gets things going. I think this is still going to be a really fun offense, but just might take a little bit while longer. And during the game on Friday, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, especially at the backup quarterback. I think that's the biggest question mark going into this game. Hendon Hooker, like I said, is starting. Kyle Allen would probably get the second half. Doesn't really necessarily surprise me that the Lions have done this. They kind of typically do this, especially when there's kind of a quote-unquote backup quarterback competition. Hendon Hooker needs to look better. Going to be interested to see how Kyle Allen responds. I thought, like I said last episode, Kyle Allen was the better quarterback, did make two really dumb mistakes throwing the ball. But overall, I thought I saw a little bit more from Kyle Allen than I did Hendon Hooker. Now, Hendon Hooker will have more times with the quote-unquote starters of this preseason game, which won't be the first, or maybe some of the second team might play a little bit. So maybe some of these guys will definitely help him out. But I think that's a really big factor going into this game against the Falcons is what's the backup spot going to look like? Is Isaac Tesla going to play quite a bit? It really seems like Tyleik Williams might play a little bit. Tate Ratledge might play a little bit. Not 100% sure, at least according to Dan Campbell in the press conference earlier today, but I definitely think you might see a little bit of action there. And then speaking of really the last news I really want to talk about, Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes both basically said that they've stayed in contact with Zadarius Smith. Brad Holmes did say it does take two to make a deal, so it doesn't necessarily seem like there's a deal done, but at least there is some conversation happening, so we can absolutely see Zadarius Smith back in the Lions uniform. Not necessarily guaranteed. Could be maybe he just doesn't want to do training camp or the whole training camp, but it could also be the Lions wanting to really see what they have on the defensive line group, because you have, like I said, Aiden Hutchinson, and then you also have a guy that hasn't been able to stay healthy, but he has so far in Marcus Davenport that has looked really good from all the reports for training camps. So going to be interesting to see what happens with Zadarius Smith. I would still bring him back. I would still sign him. I think adding him to this defensive end group would be really helpful, especially when you have a young rookie kind of in the middle that you're really going to depend on. And you also had DJ Reader as well. If you can add in a little bit more help on the outside, I think that's going to help. But there's a couple other guys on the defensive line that has been really kind of stepping up, which is obviously really great to see if you're the Lions. But yeah, that's really kind of it from the Lions part of it. Tigers, again, still struggling. And then you got the home and home between Michigan and Villanova, which I think is going to be an interesting matchup. And then obviously you have the CMU news as well. But yeah, that's really it for episode number 471. Next episode will be an interview. It's a great interview. It's with the head coach of a football team, so definitely tune into that one. But thank you for tuning into this one. Please continue to share the podcast with friends, family, anyone that you know. Really appreciate all your support, and tune in to the next episode.